Welcome to today's session. This is the full for Dorico sessions on, full for Dorico Masterclasses, and this is session 3 on layouts. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me, and I'll also just put a link in again to the session materials. Here we go. So if you want to download the session materials information there, then you can download the file. The file we'll be using today, so the session materials page looks like this. I don't need that camera on, do I? The session materials looks like this, and we've done these previous sessions. So if you've joined us before in any of these previous sessions, then the files are here. There's some recordings that you can watch for some of the previous sessions there. Session 2 is here, and the file's available for that one. And then this one is then session 3. So there's a file here which is Brandenburg 5 Movement 3 if you want to download that. Somebody said that you're getting my sound twice as good. Let me know if that's still happening. Could be my speakers, I guess, so I'll turn that down. There's not a huge amount of playback in this session, because in this session what we're going to be really doing is all of the layout things. So we're going to be presuming that you've done the note input bits from the previous session, from session 1, that you've maybe made an arrangement from session 2, and that now what we want to do is do the various layout things, and there's all sorts of things that you might want to do with the layouts. So we're going to look at page templates, and we're going to look at how we do those things. And I guess Dorico is slightly different in some cases to other software and how that works. So we'll look at lots of the options there. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat here as well. So I'm just going to make sure there's no questions at the moment. Bear with me 2 seconds. I liked the fact that you're all telling me where you're from as well. That's very useful. I'm in the UK. So possibly a slightly different time zone to some of you, but that's no problem. These sessions are all going to be recorded. So they're available on exactly the same link. So the link you're watching now, they'll be available. We have no plans to take those down. So you can come back and watch this at any time. So if this session or any of the previous sessions go a bit quick, just come back and watch those at any time, and you can pause them and follow along as you need. Hopefully you've been practicing with some of the earlier sessions as well, and some of the things you've been doing. So maybe some of the note import or some of the projects you've been doing in Dorico. That's the aim of these sessions. So today is going to be about layouts, and when I was considering layouts and lots of these options, and there are a couple of other sessions we've done on this, but hopefully this is a useful follow-on from the other 2 sessions we've done so far. And when you're considering layouts, there's lots of things that you might be looking at, or you might have even heard some of these phrases and not know what they mean. So we're going to make sure we know what all of these ones mean. But there's all sorts of things that you could be doing on the page, or that you could be doing, and it might be that actually, you're considering the page turns at this point, and you want to make sure that the page turns are okay. But we also want to look at some of the other things, because there are other things that would make a big difference to the layout of the music that you should probably consider before things like page turns. So we'll make sure we look at those as well. So today, I'm going to kind of categorize things into kind of a foundations section and a details section. The important thing here is that there's no point on the details section looking at any of these bits unless you've at least first considered the foundation side, because there's no point in, like I said, in working out where you want page turns or using system and frame breaks to do that, if you haven't actually first considered what size the paper is and what size the page margins are, because those kind of things and many other things actually will impact how the music's laid out on the page. So we'll look at all of these options, and hopefully in a suitable order, so that then when you're looking at parts and making the best use of your time, then you'll know what order to do things. So I'll move this out of the way for now, and I'm going to start with this Brandenburg file here. So if you've already downloaded this from the session materials page, then you'll have this link. I'll just put that in the chat once more, just in case anybody needs it. Also, the file, when you download it, I don't think we're going to be doing much playback, but if we do any playback, I actually have a slightly different harpsichord loaded in this project. So if you download the project at your end and you're not as keen on that harpsichord, you can replace it with various others, and we will be looking at playback and various other things next week as well. But in this particular case, just on my computer, I've changed the harpsichord. So if you wanted to use a different one, for example, there is another one you can buy from Steinberg if you want to, or you could use one in Contact, or you could use one in Note Performer, or various other things. But the default harpsichord you get with Dorico, if you don't like it, there are other options that you can potentially use if harpsichord is one of the main instruments that you want to use. And this is the one that I've then used and downloaded for this project. So in fact, I'll just put a quick link in the chat just in case anybody's interested in that one. But just in case we get to any point where we're doing playback and you're saying it's slightly different to the one you've got, that'll be why. So if you open this file, then you should see the same as I've got here. And we can have a look at this. We've got there's quite a few pages of information in this, and obviously we've got score and parts we can look at here. Most of this, layout wise, is not too bad probably, but there's lots of things that we would want to consider and options that we can use when we're considering layout type things. So what we're going to do is partly look at maybe breaking some of these things, or how we would change some of these things if we wanted to, and we'll use this project as our basis. So to start off with, those of you who are not in Europe, I guess, those of you in the US, you probably have a slightly different paper size and paper requirements than we do. So this project is actually possibly not on the paper size you want, and you might want to tweak some of it at some point to fit more the kind of layouts you want and the sizes you want. So what we'll be doing on this one is, if we just have a look in, now we're going to be in some of these options quite a lot. The first one though is going to be the preferences. So it's in Dorico preferences, and in this one, if you're on a PC, by the way, it's in the edit menu and preferences. And in here, there are some of these settings like the preferred unit of measurement. So I'm going to be using lots of millimeter options today, but if you prefer inches everywhere in Dorico, then you can set that here. So you can choose whatever your favorite is. There's also options in here for the paper type. So my paper size is set automatic, but you can set it to one of the other options if you wish. You normally don't need to. So normally if you're in North America and you're using a computer there, then it will probably set this automatically with this option. But if you need to, for example, if I take my computer over to the US and I wanted to use letter size paper, I might need to change my settings in here. And what that does is then, so this project, when I've set it up, if we go into the library menu and we go to layout options, we're going to be in this dialog quite a lot today. So if you want to remember this shortcut, it's Command Shift L, or it's written the other way around, I suppose it's written Shift Command L. If you're on a PC, then it's Control Shift L. So I might be using this shortcut a bit to get into this dialog. And what this dialog is going to tell us to start off with is that the page setup section, the paper size for the full score here is A3. And if you choose one of the other layouts here, then this one is set to A4. So you can see that the various parts here are all set to A4, but when you choose the full score, you're on A3. When you're using Dorico, if with this drop down you're viewing a particular layout, so you've chosen the score or the part, then when you then go to the layout options, you'll then find that it's selected that option on the right. If you leave this dialog open because you're working on various layouts, then just make sure you've selected the right part or layouts or whatever you need on the right hand side here. So if you want to change all of the part layouts, you can use the button down here to select all part layouts, or you can select all scores. In this case there is only one, to make sure you're then setting the right options for that layout. And yes, we will be talking about headers and footers and some of those options today, and we will also be looking at the first page template and the default page template, and why does it have two facing pages. We will be doing that as well, don't worry. So we've set the paper size here. If you want to change yours, you might want to change it to tabloid. You might want to try and squeeze it onto a letter size or anything else. Probably your parts, you might want to know letter size if you're using a standard printer at your end, or maybe you've got some other printing options and some other ways of doing it. You can use some of the larger paper sizes. We could do a whole session on why A3 and A4 are beautiful mathematical paper sizes, but we won't go into that right now. But just internationally, I'm going to be using A3 in this particular case because that's the size paper that we can print here. So we can print A3 and A4 and that kind of size in the UK. So you can set your options here. You choose whatever your options you need. This is also where you could set portrait and landscape. So if you wanted to do a landscape layout, I know some big band charts and some other things are sometimes done in landscape. So you can choose for a particular layout if you want that option. I'm not going to do that today. We've also got space size here. And space size is your staff size. So we're going to be looking, potentially we could tweak this if we needed to. 7mm is a good default size to start off with. And what that means is that the gap from the top to the bottom of the staff here is going to be 7mm. So the individual space size for each individual space is then 1.75mm. And that gives us a total of 7. Now, the rastral size is to do with the old plate engraving terms. So the tool that they used to use was a rastrum, and it would they would kind of drag that across the page or across the tin plate, and that would set. It had kind of 5 fingers on it effectively, and that would set the size of the staff. So they would pick a specific size of rastrum. And that gives them the rastral size. So this would be size 3, which would give them 7mm, and you can pick the other sizes here, or you can choose them in millimetre sizes if you want to here as well. Or you can choose custom options. You can set a space size here if you want to, and this would set individual unique sizes for things if you wanted to do that as well. So pick whichever option. I'll leave it on 7mm by default, but that is your staff size for this particular layout. It also sometimes depends how far away a part is. So for percussionists, they might need a slightly bigger staff size if the music is further away, the other side of a timpani, for example. But if you're a pianist, maybe you can have a smaller staff size because it's closer to you. Maybe your violinists, because they're going to be desks of violins, maybe they need a slightly bigger staff size because the stand is slightly further away, but your flute player might not because they're going to be slightly closer. So you can choose these and change them individually for each of the layouts if you wish. So that's the kind of the first couple of size options in there. We've also then got a couple of other options. The one here is page margins. This one will also crop up next week when we're looking at XML import. But the page margins are literally the top, bottom, left and right areas of the page. Now you can't see them here in write mode, but if I switch over to engrave mode, then you will see these little grey lines, especially at the top and the edges of the page here. So this is setting this area as to how much page margin there is on there. 14.82 is our default. And so you can see that around the edges. Now you'll also see that the frames here, and we'll be talking about these in a bit, they're butting up right to the edge of that page margin. So if I know in some cases people want to do a full page, a title page, and a graphic all edge to edge. Well, in that case, you'd have to turn the page margins off, and you'd have to set these points inside that to effectively give a page margin in other pages. But we don't normally do that. So in this case, we've got some page margins here. Now, you can't really go outside those page margins, so that's an important thing to start off with. Also, Dorico will do things like the staff labels here after it's done the page margins, so you don't need to accommodate these as part of your page margin. It'll all be done as separately. So all of these can be set. You can set same, different, or mirrored. So it depends if you've got mirrored pages and you want slightly different margins for those, then you can set that if you want to. There's also then music frame margins here, which has a top and a bottom. And when you're in engrave mode, we're not going to use the tool very much today because we don't really want to drag staves around. We're going to try and do as much of this layout as possible without dragging staves. But you can see when you do enable this tool that there's a blue area at the top here. It also encompasses the flow header information here, but this blue area here and the blue area at the bottom down here are showing you the top and bottom page margins. So you can see, this space that we're using up here. It would be the 14.11mm. So that also is deciding kind of how much space you've got on the page to actually fit the music in. So there's no point in doing some of the kind of page turn kind of things and those kind of things later on until you decided all of these things. What size is the paper? What size are your staves? What size are your page margins? Are you happy with them? And do you want to change or slightly reduce the music frame margins? Lots of these defaults in Dorico are maybe slightly generous at times because we don't know what the music is you're going to write. it. So we need to make sure we've put in some kind of guides that means most of the time your music will probably fit very nicely. But it might be that you want to tweak things. So I was doing a layout yesterday with somebody. I'm just going to discard these changes for a second. And if you're trying to get more on the first page, for example, or more on some of these other pages, then actually up here, this space here, this blue area here, might be something that you want to reduce because actually you're happier going closer to the margins. If you don't have anything else at the bottom of the page, then maybe you can reduce this bottom page margin so that the music can get slightly further down, and that will space staves out or space systems out more effectively. So that's the kind of thing that you want to set that globally, really, before you start moving individual items around. And that's what you do, all of these in the layout options. And then what Dorico is going to do is then lay out the music automatically inside that music frame. So somebody's just asked, can you set a different number of systems in the first page to other pages? Well, you can, but also Dorico will do that automatically depending on the available space. So in this page here, in actual fact, the music is quite similar between both sides, but we'll look at some of the other options for how actually this might differ. But Dorico is doing this automatically, so it's then laying out the information based on the settings that we'll look at during this session to make sure that it can put the right amount of information on the paper, and it can justify things so it can kind of spread things out to make them look nice. And it's these kind of things that we need to understand what Dorico is doing first before you want to start applying any manual overrides or anything else. So those kind of things, if you kind of think about working from the outside in, you've worked out, we're working from the outside of this page, and we're working out first this amount of space on the left hand side here and the top and everything else. We're working out inside the blue music frame. So here's the blue music frame here, that we know this, what this space is in here, and we know what the space is at the bottom. And so as long as you understand what all of those bits are, then you can understand if you need to get a bit more of that space back, or you want to change any of those settings, what they are and what you can do with them. So that's all the kind of those areas to start off with, and now we're going to look at kind of some of the things in the page and how we'd change some of those things and how we'd use things. So let's start at the top of this page. For example, we've got templates, and on the templates we've got things like titles, of course. So we have a title here, which is a project title. We've got a composer details over here. If you're using version 6, you'll also see some of the blank areas will be grey, like this project lyricist on the left-hand side here. If you're using version 5, then they'll just be blank. It doesn't show you at all. We tried to make things a little bit clearer. So in version 6, we're showing you a grey version when there's nothing there. Now, you don't want to double-click in these areas. If you do double-click in them, in version 5 it would let you edit them. In version 6 it will initially try and stop you editing them. You can edit the frame contents if you want, but basically this text says this isn't the ideal way of doing things. If you start doing that, then you're automatically going to be applying a page override. So if I do this, if I edit the frame contents in here, and I was to put something else, some other text, or I was to replace this text or delete it or anything else into here, then it means that while the text will appear here, on the right hand side over here we've got a page override. And this red triangle, this page override, means that this page is no longer following the page templates. So any changes I make to page templates now will not apply. So anything I want to change about sizes, spacing, or anything else on this page probably won't apply. If I want to remove the flow header, I can't, because it's no longer following the page template. You're doing everything manually now. So what I would recommend is not having these red triangles, and I'm going to right click and remove all page overrides so that I know that I'm not using any overrides. So to edit the information in these fields, we use a system called tokens. Some software calls them wildcards, but they're the same kind of idea. So all of this information, when you want to edit it or enter it in the first place, you can do that from the File Project Info dialog. You can also use the Steinberg hub. So when you very first start a project, if you add your title and composer in there, that also populates this same information. So in here, you can type in a title and you can type in a composer, and you can see we've got project information and we've got flow information. So we've talked a little bit about flows in some of the other sessions. A flow is an independent section of music. So in this case, if they were movements, you might have movement 1, 2, and 3. Then you've got a movement title. So effectively, this is the flow title, and you've got a project title as well. So we've basically got the project title up here, and we've got the flow title here. And we can see those tokens. If I double click up here and say, yes, I do want to edit the frame contents, you see I've got a project title here. I press escape. And if I tried to edit this one, then it will say I've got a flow number and a flow title in here, and we'll look at how we would edit that as well. So that information is being pulled in automatically. So one of the things people will then like to do is add an arranger. So let's say this was arranged by me. It's not really, but let's say, to put a name in the box. If you put your name in the arranger field like this, and then you press apply, and I'm in the project section, and I've put my name in the arranger field, and I press apply, then nothing happens. And nothing happens because this page template, the default page template, doesn't have an arranger field. It only has this project template, a composer, a lyricist, space for the flow, and it has a project copyright at the bottom. In fact, the only other thing it has is page numbers, so the page numbers are going to appear. And over here, on these other pages, we've got a flow title at this point here. But there's no arranger, so basically, Dorico hasn't displayed it because it doesn't know where you want it. Do you want the arranger field over here instead of Project Lyricist? Do you want it at the bottom? Somebody said they prefer their arranger field to be somewhere down here in the copyright, So you need to tell Dorico where you want to put that information, and where you would like it, basically. So to do that, that's where we use these page templates on the right-hand side. Let me just check there weren't any questions. No, I think we're okay. Oh, there was one, sorry. Is the music frame margin space to the page margin, or is it space to the next frame? The music frame margin, yes, good question, was, when I turn this option, it's this blue section. So you can see the music frame actually goes up to here. It's actually overlapping with this, with these other text items. But the music frame goes up to here. And the music frame margin is then inside, it's like padding inside that, that box, if you like. So it's this section between this line and the top of the staff here, that's your music frame. And at the bottom, it's the same. So the blue line goes to the bottom here, and then it's the padding at the bottom as to where that staff will be. Now you'll see some of these items can hang underneath it because it's the spacing where the bottom of the staff is, not anything else that would hang underneath it. So you can get things that would come outside that box, but that's where the music frame is spacing. It's kind of padding inside its own space, inside its own frame. So the page template, we want to edit this page template. So when you choose on the right hand side over here, if you choose page 1, it highlights the first page template here. And if you highlight page 2, then it highlights the default page template. So when I move over here, you can say that these two pages are a different template to the first page, because the first page is the one where you want to put your titles. You'll also see that these two are stuck together in the middle here, and then there's a gap, and then these two are stuck together. So effectively, this is a left and a right page, and if this is a left page and this is number 2, then this one is a right page, effectively. So when you are printing this, effectively like a booklet, if you like, the first page is actually a right page, and when you then turn the page, you've got a left and a right. And our templates also reflect that. So when we go to the first page template, so we're going to be editing page 1, it tells us we're using the first page template at the moment. So if I double click on this template down here, then it will jump us into the editor for the first page template. And you'll see I've got a left and a right page. Now the reason Dorico does this is that we don't necessarily know when you're doing this whether you're going to be using a left and a right. By default, and in this project, we're using the right-hand page, so we want to be making changes to the right-hand side, but it might be that you've added some extra pages somewhere, you've added a title page or anything else, so it might be that the first page of music is actually a left page, so you can decide either. What I would recommend, and what we'll do in this session, is we'll edit the right-hand page, and then we'll use these buttons at the top, which will copy the information from the right to the left. So it doesn't matter which one you edit in this case, because you can copy the information between them. Be careful doing this, though, if you're using the default pages, because the default pages, by default, have the page numbers in the top right and the top left. So you don't want to use these copy buttons too much because you'll end up with your page numbers all on the same side, which probably isn't what you want. Now, if you're doing your page numbers at the bottom in the middle, that's not a problem. You can use the duplicate, this copy button to do that. But just be aware of that. It's not a problem for the titles for these first pages, so that's what we're going to use for now. Oh, hang on, sorry. Part of my confusion stems from the assumption that first page, which has 2 pages, assumes the right one is the principal one. I always duplicate it with the arrow, but why? Hopefully that explains, Rick, but let me know if not. So the right-hand one is because, if I just come out of this is a right page because this page 2 is a left and this is a left. And you can, like I said, you can change it, but that's kind of the default situation. And what this project that we're using is doing is that actually it's using this page on the right hand side. So yes, I do the same. I always press this button because it just saves you coming back in here. If you decide for some reason that the first page of music is a left, then that's just how it works. Now, in practice, it might be that you're printing every page as a separate page, and you don't even put them together as a booklet. Fair enough, but that's what Dorico's doing at this point, and that's why it's using the right-hand page by default. Is that it's presuming it's a right page. So, if we want to edit this, these are now areas that we can edit and change. So, for example, the Project Composer box over here. If I wanted to make this slightly bigger, you can see I can click on the edges of the frames here. If I click on the edge of a frame, then it highlights these areas around the edge, and I can either click in this little box or this little box, and I can move these with my mouse, or if I click on the edge of a frame, I can use the Tab key, so Tab on my keyboard. For me, it's just to the left of Q, and then I can use the arrow keys to navigate to one of these other areas, and I can use the no, I said Alt is your move key in many sessions, or Option on a Mac. So if I hold down Alt or Option, I can move this very slightly and move the edge of this frame a little bit. If you're not moving it enough, you want to move it further, then you just use Option and Command, or Alt and Control on a Mac, on a PC, and then you can do bigger jumps. So you can then resize the bottom, the top, the edges of this box, or the corners, or anything you need, using either keyboard shortcuts or using the mouse. If you're using the keyboard shortcuts, when you press Tab again, then it stops selecting that box. So now if I press the left or right or up or down arrow, I can select other frames. So I can navigate around to some of these other frames. And this can also sometimes be useful because if you've got frames that overlap, for example this one, these 2 frames are now overlapping. Sometimes it become difficult to choose the correct one. So if you choose one of them and you use the arrow keys, you can navigate to the one you want. Then you can press Tab and you can navigate to the exact frame that you want. Also, when they're overlapping, as long as you've selected the correct frame, and you can use that option to select them, when you press Enter, it will then edit the correct frame here. So now I've got my cursor inside this Project Composer box, so I can now add other things into this box if I want to. If you've got overlapping frames, because you can double click, I can double click down here and edit this one. But if I double click in the middle, then I might end up editing the wrong frame because we've got this overlap again. So that's where choosing the edge of the frame, pressing Enter or Return, will then let you edit the correct option. Now it's up to you whether you add multiple text frames or you use a text frame and put multiple tokens, multiple bits of text in here. So for example, if I go to the end here and press Enter, then I could add in here the Project Arranger. And what I'm going to do is I could type it out, but if you just right click, then it will give you lots of options that you can add as various tokens here. And I want the project info information, and I want the arranger. So it's the Project Arranger field, and it will put that in automatically for me. So now I've got them both in the same frame. I could have done it as 2 frames. You get the option of how you want to do it. And also, when you double click into these boxes and you're editing them, you can then, if you select these tokens, you can set the various paragraph styles. So at the moment, we're using the Composer paragraph style. And it may be that if you want a different type of, maybe you want italic, for example, for the arranger, you could set it in here and change the option. But again, it means you might have to do it more than once. We're going to be editing both the score and the parts, and they have different templates. So it's a good idea normally to set up paragraph styles that then kind of flow the information, the size, the text, the font we want to use, all follows the paragraph styles. So it may be that you want to create another paragraph style for your arranger field, and we'll look in a second at how we would create more paragraph styles. But you can use those here. So you can use these manual options if you want to, but ideally we'll set some paragraph styles. You can also manually set the sizes. You can also set the alignment here. So if you want to, these are both aligned right with the box. The project title here is going to be centered, so you can decide then, how you want them to sit in the box, how you want the information to work. Also, for the frame itself, for this frame here, if you go to the very bottom of the page and open the properties panel, then there are options down here. There are things like show border, which you normally don't want a border around these, but there are options for borders. But a more common one is the vertical alignment. So you can see the vertical alignment is set to center. So no matter how big I make this box, these text fields will always sit in the middle of this box. If you want to be doing different sorts of aligning, then you might want to set, for example, bottom of here. So it will align with the bottom, or top. So you can align it with various areas in here. But this one is normally centered in this box here. If you go to the bottom of the page, then you'll find that the project copyright down here, which is in its own field, it's full width, this text frame here. And that's because this is also set smaller with its own copyright paragraph style. It's set centered, so it will always sit in the middle of the page, and that's why the frame fits to either side of the page, so it's always centered. And also, this frame is set with the vertical alignment of bottom, so that it will always sit at the bottom. So if you only add one line of text, it will sit there. If you add more than one line, then it might sit slightly higher. But it will, the bottom line of text will always sit on the bottom of the page margin here. Now, what you might find is if you don't make these boxes bigger, so if I had not made this box bigger to fit my project arranger in, then you would start to put text in there and it will fall out the box. And what you'll end up with is something where you've done something like this, where you've got Project Composer and not quite enough space for the arranger. And if I just press apply and close this, then the text falls out the box, and it means that here, it just fits, but only because I don't have any descenders on any of the letters in my name, and neither does Bach. Oh, I have something in common with him. That's probably where the common areas stop. But you can end up with not enough space in these boxes. So you do need to make sure, if I just zoom in over here, you do need to make sure that you've made these boxes slightly bigger. Otherwise, the information is not going to fit in the box. When you make the box bigger like this, I can press apply, but when I make the box bigger, the text information you've put in the box will also happen over here, but this box doesn't get any bigger until you've pressed the copy page layout button. So when I press this copy right to left, it's now made this box bigger. So if I was using a left page, the information would also fit there. So my recommendation is you make the changes to the right hand page here, do whatever you need in here. Maybe in the project title we want to add some other things. So let's say in here, above the project title, we want to add, I'm going to right click and we can add a dedication. And maybe this dedication, we ideally want to make a paragraph style for it. So we want to make one in here. So we'll come back to that bit. And also underneath it, I want to add maybe a subtitle. So if you wanted to add other things, let's say we've got a subtitle as well. Now, none of this is fitting. So we need to make sure that the box is bigger so that the information will all fit. But also we need to make sure we've got the right sizes of all of these. And like I said, ideally we want to do this with paragraph styles. So let's do that bit next. We'll go to the library menu and go to paragraph styles. And in here, we have all the various paragraph styles that we can use for this project. So we've got at the bottom down here, we've got a title paragraph style. And this title has the parent of default text. So there's a default text kind of base style, if you like, that lots of other things use the information from that one. So we're using default text, and then we're changing the size to size 20, and we're checking that the style will be regular. Now in default text here, default text has the Times New Roman as it is, but it's got a size, and it doesn't have a parent. So this is your kind of base style, and then you've got title, which is a bigger size of the default text. So if we want to make, for example, a subtitle and a dedication, you can take this title one and you can duplicate it, or you can duplicate one of the other styles, or you can make a new style. But I'm going to take a new one here. I'm going to call this one a subtitle. Oh, no, I'm not. Now I have. So I'm going to call it subtitle, and its parent is title. So it's going to inherit all of the rest of the information from title. And I'm going to change the size, and I'm going to make this, maybe let's make it size 14 or 16. Let's try 14. So we'll make it size 14 in here instead of 20 that we have for title. And then I also wanted a dedication, so I'm also going to take this style, or I could take title, doesn't matter. I'll take title actually, and I'll make a new one which is called dedication. And in this one, it can use title, but we're going to use a size of something. Let's go slightly smaller than the previous one. So let's go to 12, and let's also make it italic. So we've got this one as well. So now I've got a title, I've got a dedication, I've got a subtitle. So I'm going to press OK. So now I can use these. So in this field, I'll double click, I'll select my dedication, and I'm going to set this to be the dedication paragraph style. And I'll select the project subtitle here, and I'll set this to be my subtitle size, like that. So now I've got these three fields, or these three tokens in here. So it's added the information here, but it's not done the size. So we'll just press this button, and it will make the left page the same, just in case we need it. And now I can press apply, and I can press close. Now in this particular project, you can see, and in version 6, we now get these grey areas for information that's not filled in. So in version 5, you'd have empty areas there that could be filled, but they're not showing you in grey. So now if you go to File, Project Info, now you can add in the information. So this is for all the Wednesday people, because today is a Wednesday. And you could also, if you wanted to, oh, sorry, that's not the subtitle, that's the dedication. Wrong field. And the subtitle, if you want one, we could put one in as well. I'm not going to, because we're going to be using the flow headers in this particular case. So I'll press apply and close. So now I've got a dedication at the top, I've got the title, I've got the subtitle here, and then I've got the flow header, and we'll look at this one in a second. Now, the other useful thing about the paragraph styles, if I go to the library menu, paragraph styles, is that because the information kind of flows through all those various styles, if I choose default text and I was to change the font of this, so if I change this, for example, to Splendino and then press OK, all of the fonts will then update to match that font. So, and the reason that they do that is because I've changed default text, and title is using that as its parent, so now it's changed the option here, and subtitle uses it as the parent, and the dedication that I used uses it as its parent, and I've added italic, of course, and changed the size, but they're all using the same things. So the same with the composer option that we had, that's also using that same option. So it's a very quick way then of changing the text in lots and lots of places because of the way the styles flow, or the way that we say that they cascade. So that can be a very quick way of changing things. Also, when you're making your own paragraph styles, if you're going to then want some of these paragraph styles, let's say you want dedication, or you want any of these other styles that you might have made in new projects as well. So I've got a small italics option here, which I've used, which I sometimes use as a bit of staff text on the staff itself. So this particular style, I've pressed the star button here. And if you press the star button, it then saves it as a new default style on your computer. So every new project you start, you then automatically have the small italics font style already available, sorry, paragraph style. You'll already have that paragraph style available so that you can use it in any of your new projects. So it just saves you doing the extra work. If you have an existing project like this one and you want to bring other styles in from other projects, then you can do that in the library manager. So in the library manager, it will show you, at the moment it's showing me this project and it's comparing it to the user library on my computer. You can also compare it to the factory settings from Dorico if you want to. And if you want to get rid of all the blue ticks because you're happy with those, you can just show the differences, and it will show you the differences between the project you're currently working on and the factory settings. You can also drop a Dorico project in here and compare it. So if you had another Dorico project, let's just grab one over here. Then you can compare this Dorico project with the one you're working on. And it might be, for example, that you've got some paragraph styles that you've worked on in another project that you want to bring in. And you can then selectively bring in the changes of some of those paragraph styles if you wanted them. Or you can click this button and bring them all in if you wanted all the paragraph styles. So I'm going to press close. I'm not going to do that at the moment. But that's how you can then bring in changes of other style things, other paragraph styles, and various other things if you needed to bring them in from another project. That's actually it's slightly separate from the look of this, which is the template that we've now designed. So if you want to use this template in other projects, then there is an option on the right hand side here underneath your templates. You can export the page template sets. And we've got a full score template, which is the one we're editing now. And there's also part templates that we will probably edit in a little while. And you can import and export these. There's some buttons here. You can see you can import a page template set from somewhere else, and you can export the current page template set. So if you've spent a long time making the template exactly how you want it, and you want to use that in other projects, you can export it from here and use those in other projects as well. Let me just check some of the questions. Bear with me a second. Rick, good. I answered your question. That's good. Grid adjustment. I didn't actually talk about grids, did I? So if you wanted to see a grid when you're lining things up, if you click on this little eye view button up here, then you can turn on a grid if you want a page grid. And there's also rulers. So if you want rulers, if you want to be lining some of these things up and using those when you're aligning some of these frames, then you can do that as well. So there are rulers and a grid option in there if you want them. When the copyright is 3 or 4 lines, do you have to change the music frame? Yes, you do, Rita. So if you've got a large bit of copyright, I was doing a file recently where the copyright information was left aligned and there were 3 or 4 lines here. So then in the page template, so let me just collapse that. In the page template here, you would make the bottom box down here much taller so that you could then fit in multiple lines of copyright, and you might also want to move that blue music frame so that it's out of the way, because obviously you'll need more space for the copyright. So this is effectively how you'd make a larger footer, if you like, for other information you want to put down here. Maybe you want this to be left aligned, maybe you want it centered, however you want it. So yeah, the information that you put in here is all defined by this area. So yes, you might want to, and then this blue frame here is the music frame. So you then, if you don't want the music to potentially encroach into the copyright information, then you might want to adjust that as well, because otherwise it was down here. And of course I've instantly gone and edited the left page now, so now I'd have to copy it to the right page, because that's actually the one we're going to be using, isn't it? So I've already fallen for it. Also, if you want multiple bits of information, some of them are left aligned, some of them are right aligned, some of them are sat on the bottom of here, some of them are top aligned or anything else, then don't forget you don't have to just use the one frame that's here. There are some buttons up here, and you can add a new text frame. So if you want a new text frame on the page somewhere, you can make a new text frame. You can change the alignments, you can change the size, you can put these wherever you want them and sit them, put other bits of text and things and information inside them, no problem. It's just those are the default ones that were on the page, and they are commonly enough for what people need, but not necessarily always. You'll also find this when you're looking at, I'm just going to close this without saving it because I don't want to make that change. When you're looking at the default page template here, so I'm going to double click on this one. So this is what all of your other pages in the project look like. So there isn't any copyright information at the bottom. So down here, there's no extra text fields. And at the top, by default, we just show you the flow title. So effectively, in this particular project, we're showing you the movement name, or the movement title. And then on the left-hand side over here, there's an extra little box which is sat over the top of, you see these two frames are overlapping. And this one, if I just expand it, you can see it has the page number in it. So this is the page token. It only needs to be small, so actually the token doesn't even fit in this one, because it only needs to be tiny just to get the page numbers in. And it's sat left aligned to the page margin here, and the information inside it, the text, is also left aligned, so it'll always be sat there. And on the other side, we've got another one which is right aligned. So this is right aligned and centered in the box, and the flow title is vertically touching the top of that box. So you can have multiple bits of text and multiple text frames and all sorts of settings and things in those if you need them. And like I said, when you need to adjust one of these and you accidentally click on the wrong one, that's where using the arrow keys can be quite useful, because then you can actually select the individual frames that you want to use and use the tab button when you want to edit the individual frame itself here, if you're finding it difficult to do that with a mouse because they're overlapping. Let me just check a couple of the comments. How do you zoom into the view to make these changes? Of course, if you have a trackpad, you can use pinch and zoom. So if you've got one of these trackpads, then you can use pinch and zoom, and you can do it this way. So if you have one, you can. You can also, if you don't have one of those but you have a mouse, then when you scroll, of course, it's just going left and right. If you scroll and hold down Shift, then it's going to go left and right. Sorry, normal scroll is up and down. Shift, it will give you left and right. You can either use various shortcuts. You can use Z to zoom in. So if I press Z, then it will zoom in like this. If I press X, then it will zoom out. So they're really useful single finger shortcuts for things. In the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there are some zoom commands. So there are some zoom percentages. There are some buttons that you can press for plus and minus. You can also click on the little eyeglass and you can set a custom zoom level if you want to in there as well. So there's various options for that. You can also use the same shortcut as Sibelius, which is Command or Control plus and minus on your keyboard. But if you do that, then you need two hands. So I generally find that Z to zoom in and X to zoom out is a quicker shortcut for those. I'll close this one and just discard the changes. Bear with me. If you click a token and change the size, it's only a very local change. You have to edit the layout. I suppose for this page template here, I could have, if I double click on first down here, I could have just set here default changes up here without doing a paragraph style. But if I then want to use the dedication somewhere else as well, for example on the parts, then I wouldn't be able to do that with all the same settings. So it's useful normally to set it once. It feels like, well, is it a bit of a, it feels a bit longer to set a paragraph style first. But now it's a really quick change when, for example, I then want to change default text to a different type of font. So if I now want to change this back to Times New Roman because somebody's decided they don't like that font, I can now change everything back again. And because they're following all the paragraph styles, then it will do that automatically. If I'd set lots of manual things and lots of manual font choices or sizes, I couldn't make those changes later as quickly, anywhere near as quickly. So yeah, I would make paragraph styles for those if possible, even though it's tempting sometimes not to. There's a question about logos. You can do logos. So if on this first page template, if I wanted to add a logo, let's say in a top corner, maybe in that top space up here, there's a graphics frame here. So I can click on that. I can add a graphics frame into here. And then I can just double click on it. Oh, and I've double clicked on the wrong frame. So I'll click on the edge of the frame. Just that one, please. And press enter. And now it'll ask me to put a graphic in. So let's put a Steinberg Rubik's Cube in there for want of something else. There we go. So I can add a graphic into this. Of course, it's only added it to this page, so I need to copy the layout so it's added it on the other page, because this is the one we're actually using. And then when I apply that and press close, I'll now get that as part of my page template. So if you have a much better logo than that one, because that isn't a suitable logo, you can add that to the page as well if you wanted to, wherever you like, can be at the bottom or anywhere else. And that's then part of your page template. So if you want to use that on other projects as well, you can then export your page template set so that you've then got that available for other projects along with the text styles and various other things. If you set up a page to meet the project house style needs, can you save a house style first page before is that exported? Yes, if you've set all this up first, then yes, you can then export it from the page template sets down here, and then you can use it in other projects. Hopefully I think that answers the question, but let me know, Stephen. Couldn't find the instrument token to potentially add to flow title. What is it you need? Oh, is that for parts, for showing the name at the top? Rita, let me know. We'll come back to that. How do you access the paragraph styles to change them? The paragraph styles are in the library menu in paragraph styles. Oh, Rita said just found it. That's good. Flow headings, flow heading and flow title. Okay, so we are going to do these flow titles in a second. So hopefully we'll get to that one in a second. And somebody also got a question about graphical scores. We're not really going to cover that in today's session, but I will give you my email address at the end. So if you want to ask me about those, then yeah, ask me about that in another one. And then, but yes, you can import graphics. Yes, you can import graphics and use those if you want to in Dorico as well. And let's just check. Alvaro says, many of the questions here were answered in the previous seminar. Well, yes, but I'm presuming people couldn't have made the seminar on Saturday, so we're covering, it's the same session today on a Wednesday. Can you add an image on a regular page, say at the end of a flow, so just on one page? Yes, you can. You can either do that by making a new page template and applying it just to that page. So in this section here, there is a little plus button. You can make other page templates. You might also want to do that if you're making a title page, which is just text and lots of graphics, or if you're making a page which just has the poem that you're, in the text and describes the project and everything else as another page, inserted page before all the music starts. You can do all of those with page templates by making new page templates in here, and then you can apply them. So up here we've got page 1, but I can add a new page here. I can insert a page, and when I insert a page I can also say and use this other page template, so that then when you do your next project you don't have to make your page title and everything again. You get consistent look for all of your projects if you started by making a page template first. You can do it with overrides if you want to, so at the very end of your project, I don't normally want to, but for some reason today I just want to add a little graphic down here. You can do that if you want to. So in engrave mode here, you also have a frames tool here. You can make manual changes to this page. Do it at the end of your project because, like I said, it then won't be following your template. But you can add items down here. So you can add a new graphics frame, put it wherever you like on the page. You can do that kind of thing as well if you want to. But of course, that won't help you in future projects. So to help you in future projects as well, make a page template first with that graphic in the right place on the page. You can then import it into other projects and you'll get a very consistent look on all your projects. Mikhail, is there a Z order function? Unfortunately not, no. Hopefully there will be one day, but there isn't at the moment. It's not normally too much of a problem. And if you get stuck, I have, on an odd occasion, removed a frame and created a new frame, because new frames that you add will probably be on top. So if you really need to, it's not great. Hopefully one day we'll also have a Z index for that. So let's move on to these flow headers. So we've done the top section of this up here. We've added a graphic to our page template. We've added in the arranger field over here. We've got a dedication. We've got a subtitle in case we ever want it. So we've got the information that we need up here. We've set some paragraph styles. But now we have this movement 3 here. And the problem is it says 1.movement3. And we don't necessarily need the 1, but we probably want the movement title. So if you don't want flow headers at all, you might have turned them off when you were using the hub. So when you very first started your project, if you unticked this box, project will use multiple flows, you won't have got flow headers anyway. If you started your project and you do have flow headers, or you've decided subsequently you do or don't want flow headers, that's also in library layout options, because they're specific to each layout. So because there's a potential that you want a flow header on a score but not a part, for example. So a flow header is going to be in here where it says show flow headers, and you can say at the moment it's set to for all flows, and you can set it to never. You can see for your parts here they're also set to for all flows, so if you don't want them for any of these layouts you can select all before you make the change and say never, and then it would remove the flow header. It also gives you some space back here because the flow header in here also had a top margin and a bottom margin, so it was adding in extra space for the flow header. So don't just delete it from the page manually, because if you do that, it also leaves the amount of space that was there, and you've caused yourself a manual override over here. So if you don't want a flow header, go to Layout Options in the library menu and use this Show Flow Heading, set it to never. In my case, I do want it, so I'm going to put that back on, but I don't want this little one here, so I want to edit what is in the flow header in this project. So to do that, on the right hand side underneath your page templates you'd go to flow headings, and down here you've got another area here which is the default flow heading. You can make new ones, but we're just going to use the default one. So I'm going to double click on that one, and now I've got a little editor here. Oh look, it's a bit like a sunset, isn't it? I've got another area here. I can edit the flow header. I can make it bigger if you need to add more information into your flow header. You've got the same information, you can add text items, text frames, you can make this bigger if you want to. I just need to edit this. So I'm going to double click in here because I want the flow title, but I don't want the dot and the flow number. So I'm just going to delete those. And now I've just got the flow title. So when I say apply and close, then I've got the movement 3 here, and it's removed the 1 and the dot. So I've just got my flow title, and that flow information of course is coming from your project info. So this title here is what is then displayed here. So if you want any other information, if you were working on a bunch of songs all by different composers, you might have a project called bunch of songs by various composers, and you wouldn't have a composer over here, but maybe you would in the flow title. You'd have flow title and maybe a flow composer that you could add in there, and you could add that information in there if you wanted to, because it's particular to each flow. So you've got the control over which ones you want, but a common case is just to have movements. So we've got this option here. So the flow header is added. Now what you need to be aware of is we've edited all of these things on the score, but when you go to one of the parts has not been edited, because the parts layout, they have their own flow headers and they have their own page templates, because this page template is slightly different to the score. For example, there's the layout name in the top left corner. So the layout name shown here is going to be chosen, of course, to match the instruments, so you know what's going on. And you might not want the dedication on all of the parts. You might not want a subtitle. You might not need any of the other information. So you can decide here. Now the useful thing, of course, is that you only need to edit down here this first page template. It's going to be this one really, but you only need to edit this one once. Press the copy button over here so that you got it in case it's a left page, and then all of the rest of your parts will all follow the same information, but they are going to be a different option. It also might be different sizes. So when you've set up some of the paragraph styles in here, you've got sizes. You've also got a size in parts. So it might be that if you're using dedication, you pick a size, but you might want a different size in parts, because for example your title might be the same size in the score and the parts, but if you've got very different paper sizes, A3 and A4 or tabloid and letter or whatever, you might want a different size in the parts for the paragraph styles. So it's another really good way of using paragraph styles, is because you can set different sizes then for parts to make sure the titles and everything else in your parts are also exactly what you want, but don't have to be exactly the same as the score. Your default pages for parts as well, instead of the flow title, they've got the layout name at the top and the page number. So in this one, by default, we've got the project title here, we've got the flow title here, and then here we've just got the layout name, so that if you lose some of this music and you've printed them all as individual pages and one of them goes missing, or one of them is floating around the rehearsal room and you're wondering which part it is, it tells you which part it is and which page number. If you also want to put in here the flow, the project information, or anything else, you can do that, and that's not an uncommon thing to do. So then you can just edit this default page template and add in any of the extra tokens in here. So you can double click, right click up here, add in titles, add in flow titles, whatever you need to make it clear what this part is, and then it will update all of your parts at the same time. So it's just to say the score and the parts have different templates. SHA, no, we don't have a bells use chart function, but there is a page template I did for some of those, or at least a project for those you can download from our resources page. If you don't have the grey text for the frames, that's probably the difference between version 5 and version 6. So this grey text here, when you're not using these tokens yet, that only appears in version 6. It doesn't appear in version 5. You'll just have a blank white space at that point. If the text you want to add is several lines or a paragraph, do you need additional tokens for each line, or will the paragraph display correctly with one token for the note? Generally, you can just use the one. You can just use the same one. So you can probably just use the same. Yeah, you can just use the same token. So, for example, if you were using the copyright information or the other information field here, then you can put all sorts of things into here if you want to, and this would all come out as one token on the page. So just make sure you've allowed enough space in that frame so that everything will fit in there. There are also resolve markdown options. So if you wanted to, we've already got italics there. If you wanted to do things like, you can put like a star or 2 stars around some of these items, and then if resolve markdown is on, it won't display a star. Instead, it will do italic just for that one item. So you don't necessarily need a different paragraph style just to set different formatting for some of these items. So for example, if you put 2 stars like this, then you'll see this one's bold. So there are different markdown options. I think there are 3 stars as well. If you want to do things like just bold and italics in the same field, then you can do that if this resolve markdown is turned on. If you want to use stars in any of this and you actually want to display a star, you have to untick this box, because otherwise it gets used for formatting. So yes, just in case you need it. Right, so we've done those bits. We've looked at the flow headings and editing and removing them. So now we can look at some of the other things on this page and how we would lay out the information on this page, how we would actually, decide where things sit and what Dorico is doing and everything else. So the first thing you might want to look at, well, I suppose all of these could be, in any particular order, but to make sure you're aware, the transposition options. So in this project, it's going to make no difference at all. Diddly squat difference, as we'd say. But that's because none of these transpose. But if you have a score where some of the instruments are going to transpose, then in the bottom right-hand corner, you want to decide, is this going to be concert pitch or transpose pitch? And you can choose the options here. And if they had transposing instruments, then they would get potentially extra key signatures. The problem there is they might be slightly bigger, so therefore they're going to take up more space, and they're going to do that on every line, so that's going to affect the spacing of how things fit on that line. So make sure before you do all the page layout stuff, you've decided if it's concert pitch or transpose pitch. There's also the staff labels over here. So in Dorico, we've got these various names for all of the instruments, and you've also got the short names here. So to decide which ones you're using where, in the library layout options again, this time in the staves and systems section, we've got in here staff labels, and the staff labels are showing full labels for the beginning, and they're showing abbreviated labels for all of the subsequent systems. So you need to decide which ones you want. There are also options here to use the player name instead. So in some cases, if the you might have the staff label has lots and lots of percussion instruments, but you just want to say percussion 1, then you can tick the box over here to show the player name instead if you wanted to do that. But all of those kind of things might decide, how much space is available here. In version 5, when you want to edit these names, you would have to go to Setup, and you'd have to expand one of these. So let's say this one here is a bit long, the harpsichord, and you can see I've got a player of harpsichord, but I've got the instrument name labeled correctly. So if I click on these 3 dots here, I can use the Edit Names section, and I can edit the name here. So if I put, for example, a line break in there, Then you can see I've made that all shorter. This is where you'd also edit the short name that's used on other staves. Now if I press OK, then that will get shorter, and it's therefore got a bit more space. So if you wanted to do that for the other instruments as well, then you could, and you could get a bit more space back at the beginning. If you're in version 6, you can actually do it slightly quicker, because you can double click on these on the label here, and that will take you straight into the editor. So it's a useful extra option in version 6. So you can change it this way if you want to. I'm not sure this is exactly how you want to change it, but should you want to, you can change them here. And this one over here, for example, is slightly long on the short name, so maybe we can edit that one. So in version 6, you can just double click on the label. In version 5, you need to go to setup mode, and you'd expand the player and use the edit names section here. Click on the 3 dots, use the edit names section. There's also for parts, or more especially for parts, there's a gap at the beginning here. So we don't normally show the staff labels here because this is a part and it's shown up here. This label here, where it says flute, and if we go to one of the other ones like harpsichord, you can say this one says harpsichord even though the score didn't. The score was using the proper name here. So these are differing labels. This label here is actually using the label over here. So this is your layouts list, because it might be that this is, for example, in a if this was a musical theatre, it might say read 1 and it's playing flute and clarinet and saxophone, for example. So you can change that here. And you can double click on these and you can change the names in here, and this is then used as the layout name up here. So if you're also going to be using that across the top of the other pages, so up here, then you'd also want to make sure you're using the layout name there as well, or the token for the layout name. So sorry, I was on this part, wasn't I? So this gap here, it's not a staff label gap. There's just a gap that we set, a kind of indent in the very first system of the flow. So in layout options here, for staves and systems, underneath your staff labels section, this is also where, by the way, you can set your pitch and transposition. So you might want to show the transposition if it's a B-flat clarinet, for example, or a clarinet in B-flat. You might want to show that in the full staff label, but not in the abbreviated labels. And this option here, position of instrument pitch in staff labels, will set the difference between saying, currently this would say clarinet in B-flat, and if you choose this one, it would say B-flat clarinet. So it would put the instrument pitch at the start or the end of that label. If you keep moving down, in here, this is where we've got this indent section, and the indent section says we indent the first system of the flow by 6 spaces. So that's what this gap is here. If you don't want that gap, then you can just set that to 0, and then it will not have a gap in there at all. So if that's important to you for the first line, that's the indent. The other thing really for scores, before you kind of decide where the pages are all going, how they're all going to be laid out, we've got a bit more space back here on all of the pages because we've edited the staff labels. But one thing that can make a really big difference is deciding if you're having a short score or not. So do you want to display all of these empty systems or these empty bars when nobody's playing? So again, library layout options. In the vertical spacing section, there's all sorts of sections in here that we'll probably come back to shortly. But at the bottom is the staff visibility. And actually this vertical spacing section, I kind of read this from the bottom up, because the way things happen actually is kind of from the bottom up of this section. So in here for staff visibility, if you want to hide empty staves, then you can say after first system. And in this particular score, you'll get this. So the first system is going to always show us all of the instruments. And after that, it's going to optionally hide the other instruments. And maybe we want to try and fit this into this page. So if you're doing this kind of layout, this is obviously hide empty staves is an important thing to do first. You can't drag this over to here. What's actually happening with the spacing is Dorico has laid out this system here. It's then put the gap in here between these two systems, and it's put this one in here. Because it uses standard gaps, it then will have used the same gap underneath, and once you've got down to about here, there's then not enough space before the project copyright information that we've got at the bottom and the frame to fit all of this in. So at the moment, on the spacing, it wouldn't fit. And when you go to engrave mode, you can see in the bottom corner down here, it also tells you a percentage of how much things are full. So it says 71.9. And when you click on the staff spacing option, it actually shows you all of the sizes here. So the sizes of each individual gap, the size of this gap, and once you'd added, for example, 35mm to the underneath here, you would not have managed to get in all of these ones here. So that's why it hasn't put them in, even though you look at it and go, oh, I'm sure there's enough space. Well, there isn't with the current settings. So that's one of the things we can look at as to, so how would we get that to display down there? But the main thing here is whether hide empty staves is on. And also with the hide empty staves, if you want to hide all of these ones as well, you can say all systems. So if I press apply and close, then actually we've now got a lot more information on the first page because we're only showing any systems with music in them. So now we've got 4 on this page automatically anyway, and then it will continue laying out the rest of all of the music because everybody's now playing. This one, we can then choose options like, do we want a gap at the bottom or in the middle, depending on the music available on all of these staves and what the gaps are. But that's a very important thing to decide before you start doing page breaks or anything else, is do you want to use the hide empty staves? We'll say never. We'll go back to the default to start off with. But it's an important consideration you want to look at. Another one for some other types of layouts, probably not for this one, but for some other types of layouts, would be what's called casting off, or you might just know it as setting 4 bars per system. So in a lot of lead sheets and jazz arrangements, this would be done. A lot of studio music, this would be done. And again, it's in library layout options because it's specific to this layout, the full score. And you choose staves and systems and casting off. Casting off, again, it's an engraving term that plate engravers used, and what they were working out is how much space is there in the width of this system, how many bars can I put in, how many notes will fit, and everything else. And all of this was decided before, of course, they started punching any of the music into the metal plate. Fortunately, we can do this whenever we like, but the term is still called casting off. It's not something we created, it's a publishing term. So you can set a fixed number of bars per system as 4 bars. You could also optionally set a fixed number of systems per frame. This is probably more a lead sheet type style when you want to get something exactly the same on all pages. We definitely don't want it for this score. So if I was to do a fixed number of bars per system and press apply, and you can leave this dialog open, by the way, if you want to. If you want to put it on another screen, you can do that. Now I've got a fixed number, and I've not had to do any manual setting of any of these. There's no system breaks or anything else. This is just automatically setting everything to 4 bars. If you decided that that was actually not, was a bit much and you wanted 6 instead, then if I set it to 6, then actually, we can fit more on the page. So if you want that kind of consistent look for your project, probably not for this one, then you can do that just by setting the casting off option here. I'm going to turn that one off because I don't think we probably want it in this particular case. We want the music to work out or where it wants to sit on here instead. Now, another option you might want to look at, which is also this kind of spacing left to right, is it also in the same layout options, but this one is note spacing. And the note spacing option here is setting how much space basically there is for a quarter note. And by default, we're allowing 4 spaces. And this is another one of those settings where maybe Dorico's sometimes a little bit too generous. And what you can often do is reduce this slightly. And this is something I would certainly look at if you're looking across all of the music here and you're deciding actually this is now getting to page 22 here. And actually, could we make it fit on less pages? The quickest way of doing that is just to reduce the note spacing, because it will reduce the note spacing all the way through the entire project and make it all consistent. So if I reduce this down slightly, I'm just going to press the down arrow and press apply, and you'll start to see even just that tiny change from 4 to 3 7/8 has meant that now we're on 21 pages instead of 22 pages. I've not had to do anything else to the layout of this. You probably, in most cases, won't even have noticed the change has happened, but it will have just reduced the spacing in this entire layout just slightly to make things fit. Now, if you take this down too far, let's keep going. So 3 3/4. Now it's on page 21, but we're only using half of it. 3 5/8. 3 1/2. We're on 20 pages already, by the way. That didn't make too much of a difference. That one has 3 1/4. Let's see if we can go one more, or maybe 2 more. One more is enough. So now we're 19 pages. So I've reduced the number of pages we're using. Now, some of this is looking a little cramped, maybe. Maybe it's not. Maybe depending on the music font you're using. We haven't really talked about music fonts, but if you're using a narrower music font, this might have adjusted some of the spacing anyway, so you can change it in the library music fonts section. And maybe, maybe that's also the look you wanted. Maybe you do need to, for some reason, do something, that's more cramped. So if you want to adjust it, I think this is a bit too much in this particular case, but you can adjust the note spacing and get things down to individual levels. There are also options if you've got a couple of pages which need more wider note spacing, but generally you could have less note spacing. You can set the general option in layout options, and in engrave mode, in here you can set a note spacing change. So when you choose a bar line or something on the page, you can set from this point a note spacing change, and in here you could override the settings from this point on in the project and have a different type of note spacing if you needed it. So maybe just in a couple of pages you need it slightly wider, you can do that, and then you can reset it after that, and it will go back to the setting that you've got in here in layout options. So I'm going to set this one, it wasn't 4, was it? It was slightly less. So I'll put it back to 4. I can't remember which one it was now. That was on 22 pages, I think. Was it just down one notch? And then we're on 21 pages. Yes, there we are. So now we're on 3 7/8. So just that little note spacing change has already meant that we don't have that extra hanging half a page that's happening over there. Let me just check some of the comments. Bear with me a second, because I noticed there's a couple here. Yes, Raphael's used an important option. If you want to use a star, you can use the slash, backspace slash as an escape character, so you can show the star. As an aside, I wish it was possible to make a pickup without having to code. Yes, you can. You can just use when you're adding your meter in here, there's a pickup bar option down here, so set a pickup bar however many beats you want in the option you're in. So yes, there's an option for that too. If I engraved everything in concert pitch height, I would print parts in transposed pitches. They will by default. So if you've added a clarinet part or anything else into here, all of the parts by default will be in transposed pitch. In the players section here, for the transposing layout will be turned on for all of these layouts, even if they're not a transposing instrument. The option is still turned on, and if you add any instruments, of course, like a B-flat clarinet, it will be on by default. Also, if you try and print, so if you try to go to print and print a layout and that option is not turned on, you'll get a warning that says, are you sure you want to print this because it's not transposed? But yes, you can view it down here with this concert pitch transpose pitch toggle as well. So if you want to set it down there, there's an option to turn it on also here in the edit menu, concert pitch transpose pitch, when you're looking at scores or parts. And it also exists, as I said, in layout options in the players section at the top for transposing layout. Can you move one measure to a previous page? So yes, so you can align rehearsal letters. Yes, you can. Let me check the next. I've not skipped over anything else. No, let's do that bit next, I think. So we've looked at globally how this part's going to work out. However, let's say we've got some rehearsal marks, or we just want to move some bars around. So let's say, I don't know where a good example is. So let's do some, and then we can show you how to undo them if you don't want them. So let's say on page 2, this bar here wants to go, we want to put it at the end of page 1. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. The quickest probably is in engrave mode. If you choose an item in this bar here, it doesn't matter, this note, that flag, that rest, a bar line, whatever you've chosen, there are some options up here to move to previous system and move to next system. So this will move this one down to here. And the shortcuts for these are comma and full stop. And the reason for that is that, at least on my keyboard, they have the chevrons on them, the arrows. So it's your hairpin buttons, basically, isn't it? But if you just press comma, so I've got this selected, if I press comma, then it will put this down here. Now, it's made that fit on the page. It's also highlighted it in red here. And the difference is that this one's green and says it's not actually full. it's 92.9% full, and we've used 117.5 of the available spaces, of which there are 126.6. This one is now over full, so you might have some more collisions or issues. It's trying its best to make everything fit in here. You know, it's not bad, but it is a bit tight. Maybe we didn't really want to do this, and it's telling you how full it is in spaces here as well. So you can use that just to move one bar in a particular direction. I'm just going to press, in fact, before I press undo, I'm also going to show you, at this point, if you have signposts turned on, so if you choose this option, I turn my signposts on and off a lot with shortcuts. You'll see what this has done is at the top of the page up here and down here, it's added a system break. So we've got this signpost for a system break. And what this is doing is this system break is saying, I'm now going to squish everything into this line, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to say I'm waiting for the next system break. So this one says all of the music has to come into this system until you meet another system break. Here's the next system break. So this one doesn't have that option set. So that's what it's actually done. By pressing that button, it's set a couple of system breaks so that the music will fit. Now the problem is, if you then say, oh, I didn't want that, I'll just delete this system break. We're going to get a really big mess. So when I press delete, it's now going to fit all of my music onto the same page, because this system break, which you actually can't really see, it's in there somewhere. There it is. It still says wait for next system break. This is the kind of thing you don't want. So you either choose this and turn this option off, or you can delete the system break, or if you can't get hold of the system break and can't select it, and it's not easy to find or anything else, if you go to engrave mode, format music frames, you can reset the layout, and that will just go back to normal. So it will remove any system breaks that are in there and will set everything back to normal. So I just wanted to show you, in case you ended up with that situation, when you start deleting those system breaks, you can get into that situation. Reset the layout, or just toggle that option off to wait for next system break, and it's all okay again. So if you wanted to move this bar onto the next system instead, so this one here, then you press the other button, which is period or full stop, and it will move that one over. So I've got a system break here now, and I've got a system break up here, and it's forced that onto the next page instead. So it doesn't really change the rest of the layout. The rest of it's probably still okay. It's still okay. It's still on 21 pages. You know, there's no massive problem. It's accommodated the little change there that you've made. So if you've got a rehearsal mark that you want to just put at the beginning of the system, that's a really good option to use, just so that you can move the occasional page. I've just pressed undo to remove those. Also, if you've maybe only got, if this is a bigger score and you've only got one system per page, then that's obviously going to move things onto the next page just straight over. So that's obviously a really good way of just quickly formatting the score. Choose an item on the page and use these two, which is the buttons, which have the arrows on them anyway, but it's comma and full stop to move those onto other options. There's also options if you want them. So if you said, I specifically want to put something in a system, you can select, for example, from here to somewhere else. So let's say from here to here, and you can select an item here and an item here, and you can say make into system, or even make into frame. If I make into system, it will force everything into one system. I just press undo for a second. If I make into frame, then it's forced this to be the frame. So you see, this is now the end of the frame. Also, it's whether Dorico will allow some of the music to not be in that frame, and you can split bars and things if you really wanted to. We probably don't in this case, so I'm going to press undo. So there are options to kind of force things into a system or force things into a frame. We call it a frame, not a page, because you theoretically could have more than one music frame on a page. Commonly you don't, but effectively a frame break is a page break, and the system break obviously is a system break. But yes, you can theoretically have more than one music frame on the page if you want to. So there's a slight difference in terminology with frame and page there. Let me just check a couple of the comments again for that bit. Roland, hopefully that's answered your question. If you want default system to be to 4 bars but one has to be 3 bars, does it adjust the following bars? Yes, it does. So if we were using the casting off option, and we'd set this to 4, like this, and then you needed this one to be 3, you can push this one onto the next page, and now it will continue in 4s. So that's one way of doing it. So you've got 4, 3, and then it will continue in 4s from that point on. If you wanted to affect this one to make it 5, that's when you might use these options, select a couple of these items, and you might say make into system, so that you've now got, oh, I've done an item in the middle again, haven't I? That's turned on for my project, obviously, not normally. Make into system. So now I've got 4, 3, 5, and then it will continue in 4s from that point. So yes, you can do those little overrides of things if you need to, Tim. Yes, no problem. I'm just going to undo all of that because we don't actually want it in this project. Undo the change for casting off. There we go. The next question, the project resource I mentioned, yes, for handbells. If you go to our resources page, so I'll just send you a quick link, which is, where is it? I'll go here. So this resources page, if you have a look on there, there's all sorts of resources, but scroll down on that resources page, and if you look for project templates, there's a link to project templates, and it'll take you there to a handbells chart. So if you need that one, then yes, you can get that one as well. This is why we do these things live. We can answer your questions as we go. If you add lyrics, what happens with the fixed notes width? When you add lyrics, give it a try, but when you add lyrics into here, in the note spacing option, there is an option to make space for lyrics. So generally, it should do a good job of making space for those kind of things as well if you need it. There's some other advanced options and things down here as well. But yes, it will automatically, should try and make space for lyrics as much as possible. And there are other settings for the lyrics and that kind of thing as well. Can you group text frames for dragging items together at the same time? I presume you mean in... sorry, not that one. Let's do this one. If you're editing a page template and you want to be moving multiple things, so if you select this one and this one, for example, so you can hold down Control and you can select more than one item, but while it will select them, dragging them is generally going to select the same thing. But if you use Control or Command, in my case, because I'm on a Mac, and select a couple of items, like in the middle like this, I can now use my shortcuts like Option and so I'm using Option, Command, or Alt and Control on a PC and using the arrow keys, and you can then move multiple items around if you do that. So yes, select the edge of a frame, hold down Control or Command and select another edge of a frame so you've got multiple selected, and then you can use the shortcuts to move those, but you can't unfortunately use the mouse because that tends to select another item as you're dragging it. Tim, yes, I used system breaks. Yes, well, I either use system breaks to add in those extra bars or change bars, or when you choose an item here, I use these move to previous, move to next system, and use those shortcuts because they're often quicker. Because you can just choose a bar, hit that shortcut, like period, move it to the next system, or comma, move it to the previous system. So yes, that's what I would use. So that's kind of some bits about page turns and those kind of things, how you could set page turns if you needed to. So as you're looking through your music, you might decide, well, this bit here actually with the triplets would look better on the next page, so we can just knock that onto the next page with period or full stop. Maybe there's something else that would look better on the previous page, or if you've got in the parts especially, let me just press undo again. In the parts, it might be that maybe you want to put this multi-rest at the end of the line. That would make more sense. So you can choose this. You can just press period or full stop, and you can move it. We've now actually got too much space on here, so we probably also want to adjust some of these other bars and spread things out a bit. Maybe that's a daft case. That one's already on there anyway. But you can adjust those as and when you need to. I would say for this one, for example, the first thing I would do with this one with two systems hanging over here is I would adjust the note spacing. Presuming we've sorted out all of this, space and everything else, to look at a part, and we're looking at violin 2 now, so it's chosen violin 2 for me, I would just go to note spacing to start off with and say, we're already on 4 pages. If I just nudge this down a tiny bit, then can I fit this onto, oh look, I'm already, I've got slightly less systems happening. This is difficult to do on one screen. There we go. So let's move it down a little bit, 3 5/8. I'll make this dialogue smaller. There we go. So now we're on 3 pages. So now we can look at where the page turns are. Well, actually, this maybe doesn't make as much sense to make it a page turn anymore, but I'm on less. I've got, less pages to deal with. The other thing, of course, is the staff size. So maybe if this was a soloist, then you could reduce the staff size. So, but the note spacing option keeps the staff size the same, but just makes the notes tighter together. So that's the note spacing option here. On the other option you've got, of course, is if you go to your page setup, you could reduce the staff size down maybe 0.5 centimetre. And that would also reduce it down to the smaller number of pages. So, there's a couple of options that you can make for tweaks to those. But what you're not doing is dragging these staves around or trying to force them onto these pages or anything else, because I don't think that's the best way of doing things. I think, adjusting the note spacing slightly or the staff spacing slightly is generally a better global option for all of those kind of changes to make things fit on a page. Now, there's a couple of other things about fitting things on a page that I think we probably want to look at, if that's okay. Oh, hang on, there was a question. Sorry, hang on a second. How do cues affect the spacing? Maybe part layout. Oh, sorry, you mean orchestral cues. Well, normally the cues, you try and fit them in the same staff, so you'd use the Dorico cues function. So if you wanted to add a cue, so for example, at the beginning of this piece, if you want to tell all of these other instruments who's starting, you can choose a couple of bars or however many you want, and you can use the cues option and you can create a cue. And if you create a cue from the top player there, you would just get a label in the score, but in the part you would then get a cue, but it would still be inside the same staff, so that shouldn't affect things spacing wise too much for everything else that's going on. If you do add a cue, and for some reason, let me just undo that, if you're adding a cue and you're adding an extra staff above, then yes, obviously that's going to affect spacing in that particular part as well. So make sure you do any of that before you do any of the layout as well. Can you make a system size on a certain page smaller? Yes, you can. You can also make an instrument smaller all the way through the project. Good point. So if you choose, for example, here in this harpsichord part, if I choose both parts of the harpsichord part, so I'm using Shift, and I right-click, I can then go to staff size and I can choose a smaller staff size. I know that's not what you asked, but we'll get to that one. So that changes the instrument all the way through the score. So not in this case, but if you've got, for example, choir and piano, and the choir is a choir part, and it's a rehearsal pianist, they want to see what's going on in there, you could make it smaller because that will reduce the amount of space needed for all of that. I just press undo. The other option is if you want to make things smaller on one page, so we want to make this page smaller than any other pages, or we want to make page 2 smaller than page 3, for example, just to fit a little bit more on that page. It is occasionally done by some publishers. If you just set a system break at the top up here, so if I just say, you've got all your options in here, but you can say, create a system break here. Didn't actually do anything, but I've now got a marker here, which is this system break. When you choose the system break now, the signpost, at the bottom down here, you can change the space size. And you remember from our layout options, the space size is this option here, 1.75. So my 7mm staff, 1.75 is the default space size. And I can change the space size from this point on. So if I say the space size is now smaller, so it's now a lot smaller, this page is larger, this page is now smaller, and this page is also smaller because it's from this point on. So now on the next page over here, if I just set a new system break, and I can turn the space size option on and set it back to 1.75, now I've made one page that's now smaller than the others. So this is the 7mm we had before. This is now a smaller size for this page, and then this goes back to the other one. Now this is a severe case. Normally you only adjust it very slightly just to make a little bit more space to make things clearer on that page. But if you need to, yes, you can do that. And because it's attached to these system breaks, if you choose those and press delete, then again it will go back and reset the layout to be back at the normal size. Can I force imported XMLs from Finale to comply to these project templates? Yes, you can. Let's do that next week, because next week's session will be on XML import as well as playback options. So yes, let's do that. Distance between staffs. Janet, I'm glad you asked. That's exactly what we're doing next. So All of these staves in here, in fact, let's go to some with some music on as well. So all of these staves in here, they all have the sizes set, and there are slightly different sizes. If you click on this little tool on the left, there are slightly different sizes between these two, which are in the same family effectively, and these that are all braced together. You see, these are all 13.4, and this one is 17.9. So between families, there's a slightly different gap there and here. And there's also a slightly different gap here on it with a grandstaff instrument. So these are, you can see they're all consistent sizes. Now, if there were more dynamics in this piece, then you might get slightly bigger gaps. So this is a good example where there aren't any dynamics or anything else of seeing the consistent gaps between all of these. Don't use this tool and drag these around. There's no point. It'll take you a long time and you'll end up creating more mess than you would have done. If you start dragging these things around, you'll also start getting these red areas on the page. So Dorico is telling you these are items that have been manually dragged, and we're trying to avoid doing these so that we can let Dorico do things automatically. So if you select these items and press delete, then Dorico will jump back to the default positions for all of these. So what we want to do is we want to make this a bit more of a global setting, really. So we go to Library Layout Options, and we go to Vertical Spacing. Now in here, there are vertical gaps, so there are minimum gaps set in here, but let's first just go to the bottom of this dialog, because I said I use this one upside down, really. I use these options the other way up. So staff visibility we've already looked at. Are we hiding empty staves? No. Then we've got vertical justification, and there's two options in here which confuse everybody. But what Dorico is doing at this point is it's either spreading out all of these individual staves, see, so this one says staves, so to fill the page, or it's spreading out these two systems, so this one says systems, it's spreading out the two systems on the page so that it fills the page. Now, if I turn both of these to 100, they're effectively both turned off. So if I put them on 100, and then we have a look at this page, you can see this is what Dorico would do if it wasn't justifying these pages. You'd get all of these gaps in here, you'd get this gap here, then you'd get all of these, and then you'd have a big white space at the bottom. And that generally isn't what people want. But if you do want these big gaps at the bottom, then you can do this, you can use this setting. So effectively, these are turned off now because they're on 100%. These 100%s Dorico is getting to this point here. You see down here it says 87.5, and this is 87.5. This music on this particular score is fairly consistent. That's 89.1 because there's a little bit more going on with some dynamics and text that's added a few more spaces. But you see we're not at 100%. Therefore, justification will not happen. So therefore what Dorico is doing, it can use these collision avoidance options. It can add a bit more space between systems if it needs to. It can add space between individual instruments if the dynamics get in the way. Other than that, what it's actually doing is using these gaps up here. So the inter-system gap is 20 spaces. So there will be 20 spaces between this system and this one. There will be between the individual staves, 6 spaces. The staff group to staff group and these families, they have 8 spaces. So that's why you've got a slightly bigger gap here than you did between these staves. So this is where you can set all of these spacing options if you want to. However, if you don't want this look, but you actually want Dorico to spread things out and fill the page a bit more nicely, that's where you do want to use one of these two options. So we're going to look at these two. So let's do the top one first. The top one, if we set this to be less than the number on this page here, so this is 87.5. So if we set this to be, let's say, 80, because that's less than 87.5, and then press apply, any of the pages that are more than 80 will now spread things out. So what it's actually doing, it's spreading out the staves and the systems. So the two systems now meet the bottom and top of the page, and these staves can all spread themselves out slightly if they want to be more generous with the spacing to fill the space a bit more. If you don't want that option, so if we put that to 100 and we put this one to 80, then what will happen is the staves, so these two systems, this one and this one, are now meeting the bottom and the top of the page, but we've got a big gap in the middle because Dorico is using the exact spacing that you've specified, or we've specified, at the top up here. So you can now decide, is this the look you want with a big gap in the middle? Do you want to manually change these gaps here? So this is 6 spaces in here. Do you want to manually change all of these? Or do you just want Dorico to spread them out a bit more? In which case, you want this option to say 80 and this one probably to be turned off or to be set to something else. So if we do this, now this system has jumped up a bit and it's filled in a bit more of the space in the middle. You can reduce this gap. So this gap in the middle is this 20 spaces. You can reduce that as well if you want to, so that you've got less gap in the middle as well. And Dorico will then fill, it will move all of these systems out slightly again to fill the space. So you should then have control over exactly what you've got. And the way you need to be looking at this is these numbers at the bottom, the 87.5, and this score is fairly consistent. Like I said, there's an 89 there, another 87.5. So you can get a consistent look across all the pages. But if you, in your projects, if you've got more dynamics and everything else, you may get other variance between the systems. And you will find probably it happens more often in parts. Now, again, there aren't many dynamics in this part, so it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. But where you do have things where, let's just go into write mode for a minute. If you had got things where things are moving and colliding, what Dorico will actually generally do. Let me just put those back. Undo. What Dorico will generally do. So this is violin 1. Is in vertical spacing. By default, we have collision avoidance turned on for all of the parts as well, and I often turn it off, and that's why it's off for this project. So if I turn this on and press apply. Now, when you're looking at the vertical spacing, you will not necessarily, this project is fairly consistent, but in your project, you will not necessarily get consistent numbers between all of these. And if you've got bars where some of the notes are higher or lower, so if this one was just a bit higher and this one was a bit lower, for example, you will start to change the gaps between all of these staves. So Dorico will try normally to do this collision avoidance to stop that happening. But if you're happy that you can just make some minor tweaks to things yourself, then I would select all of your parts here and I would turn off collision avoidance for parts, so that you then get a consistent look in the parts and the same kind of gaps everywhere. Don't do it for the score generally, because the score normally has more variance between the systems, and so you normally want a bit of collision avoidance in the score, so you have to do less changes of things here. But yes, you need to decide, how do you want this to look? And in this particular case, I think setting this so that the staves and systems can both spread out a little bit on the score is the best look, and not doing this one because I get a big gap in the middle instead. So if I apply that, I think this is probably the best look for this score. And that'll give you the options you want. There's also an option for parts in particular, where if you've already set, if violin 1 and violin 2 are basically exactly the same. Now in this project they won't be, because we've got a principal one and a viola here and a violin here. But if you have got, for example, multiple horn parts, multiple trumpet parts, instruments that are the same, and you've set the exact look and style and everything, and you've got it correct for trumpet 1 and you want it to be exactly the same for trumpet 2, then over here on the right hand side for your layouts, you can right click and you can say propagate the part formatting. And you can choose, for example, trumpet 1 if this was trumpet 1, and propagate all the formatting, including the layout options and everything else, and propagate it to trumpet 2. So you don't have to make all the same changes for trumpet 2 or whichever the other instrument is. Now it does mean it's literally everything. So if basically the notes are all the same, but maybe occasionally the pitches have changed, and all the rhythms are the same and everything, and you want all the system breaks and everything to be in the same place, this is a really quick way of just propagating that part formatting over to make sure you've got everything exactly the same. Can be slightly dangerous, and you might want to do that, and if you, like I said before, I'm not going to do it in this case. If you then need it and you decide the part doesn't look right, use the option to reset the layout, because you can then set it back to the Dorico default later if you need to. Let me just check if there's any questions. Hang on a second. Best answer ever. I'm not sure which answer it was, but good. Glad about that. Can you shorten the size of the rest bars? Yes, there is an option to shorten those, although in this score it's actually the notes that are defining the size of those. Will we ever have a masterclass where we have a contemporary music score full of crazy techniques to see/learn how Dorico handles this? Maybe. I mean, I don't plan one at the moment, but Ricardo, do you want to send me an example, even if it's a PDF of this is the kind of thing I want to create? Maybe we should do a masterclass on that. Yeah, why not? I know we've done some on some other things, like we did one on creating a symphony, and we took some Mahler. We've done one on build a big band and how big band arranging and that kind of thing. But yes, maybe we could do one of those. There's also we've got cutaways and that kind of thing in Dorico 6 now. So if you want to do cutaway scores where the bars are eliminated completely, that's a really quick thing to do as well. Spaces equals rastral size, Luke. Oh, hello, Luke. Spaces, I didn't really explain spaces. The best way to explain spaces is in page setup. When you're looking here, the space size is 1.75. So the rastral size is officially size 3, which is a 7mm staff, which is the distance from here to here. But that means that a space size, one of the spaces in here, like where this single note is 1.75. So when we were then looking at the vertical spacing, and we're talking about 6 spaces between these two staffs, in this particular case, because the staff size is 1.75, it's 6 times 1.75. So it's 6 spaces, and that's how big they are. So that's how you could work out, if you needed to, how many millimeters it is. Hopefully that helps. Let me know. Aleatoric boxes are not quite there yet. No, but there are some options for doing it if we want to look at them. And we could show you. There's a great video that Philip Arthur Simmons did, and he's done a template for aleatoric boxes. If you want those, we could potentially look at that. Where should I send it? So if you've got questions that we haven't answered in this session, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. So send questions to discoverdorico@steinberg.de. I have got a number of emails to do at the moment, so I might not get back to you straight away, but I will, don't worry. All the previous classes are already available on YouTube. So yes, no problem on that front. You can look at all of the other questions, all of the other ones. If they're not automatically linked as part of this video, there is a playlist for them. When you're on our, where is it? Here we go. When you are on the full for Dorico page where you signed up, I added some links actually here to the. Oh no, refresh the page. Here we go. So there's a playlist here. So these are the Wednesdays. So here's the Wednesday playlist of all of the videos. So I'll just put this in the chat since it's a Wednesday. So that's all of these sessions, including the one next week, which is on XML import and that kind of thing. Now, very quickly, you occasionally need to drag a staff, very occasionally. So if you need to drag staves, you can use this tool, this staff spacing tool. And like I said, you can choose this option at the top here, and this will move this whole system. I'm just going to press undo. You can move an individual staff. There's a little box in here, and you can move an individual staff. It's not affecting anything else. It's just affecting this one staff here. There is an option if you hold down Alt or Option. So if I click on this and hold down Alt or Option, when I drag this, you see it's concertinaing all the ones underneath. And so these all now have red boxes because they've all been manually moved to somewhere. And you can do the same if you drag things up, then you can make more space in here as well. Now, I would say, drag a box over all of those, press delete. You generally don't want to move them. The only time you want to do that is maybe, let's say for some reason these two staves have got slightly too close to each other and you just wanted to make a tiny bit more space here to make it a little bit clearer. Maybe occasionally at the very end of a project when you've done all of the other spacing things and the staff size, and set your page breaks and everything else, maybe you occasionally want to do that. But as a general rule, you don't want to drag staves. Dragging staves, dragging this staff up or left is not ever going to put it on this page. Dorico doesn't work like that. So, and it also clearly shows you which ones have been moved. So all of these, because they were concertinaed as well, they're all showing you that they have been moved. So if you're wondering why is there some weird spacing, check in this spacing tool here, and check to see if you've got any red boxes, and select them and press delete, and Dorico will jump back to the default settings at that point. So you generally, hopefully, don't need to move the staves. There's also a couple of things that I had as questions before, so I'll just mention these. One is about multi-rests. By default in the score, multi-rests are not turned on. By default in all of the parts, multi-rests are turned on. He said picking a part that doesn't have many. There's one. You can turn them on and off if you want to. So if you go to Layout Options, then on the left-hand side here in the Players section, there's a bar rests and multi-bar rests, and you can turn off bar rests. You can turn off multi-rests. So now that one's turned off, and if I choose multi-bar rests, then you can turn them on. The bar repeats is different options, the jazz option for bar repeats. So whether or not you want those to be on or off is set in the layout options. But like I said, multi-rests are not on automatically for the score. They are on automatically for the parts. If you're making a lead sheet and you start in the score and there's only one instrument, and then you want to turn on multi-rests, well, actually, just switch to the part because it's already got them turned on, and that might also have set the other options that you want and the label at the top and various other things. Sometimes people get a bit tripped up and they're working on the score when it's only a single instrument and they should just be working on the part layout instead. To switch to a part layout, choose an instrument, a note, and anything, and press W, and it will jump you straight to that part. Press W, it will take you back to the score as well, which is a nice trick. One other thing was, somebody did ask earlier about rehearsal marks. If you add a rehearsal mark, so let's say here, Bach wants a rehearsal mark just there. Just pressing Shift A will add a rehearsal mark. Shift A again will add another one. So there's B. But sometimes it's nice to make them sit over the top of the systemic bar line here. There is an option for that automatically. So spacing wise, don't drag them all manually. Go to engraving options, look for the rehearsal marks, and then scroll down and find this option here to left align them with the systemic bar line. So I press apply and close, and then it will move it here. It also turns off the bar number at that point by default, because you don't need the bar number as well if this is being displayed there, and it's now done all of them automatically. And that can also help with spacing, because if you've got this and some system text in here, so let's say we do Shift-Alt-X and we add some text in here. So this will now appear in all of the parts. So even in this part down here, because it's system text, we've got some text. But if these were displaying as they were, so if they were displaying here, then you get this, where you've got more gaps and more spacing issues. Now, if this was another bar in the piece, so let's say both of these were actually over here, then you might find that this is causing you more issues, because the option in the engraving options is only going to sort this one, but this is still potentially causing you extra spacing issues. So another trick you can do is, if this is causing you spacing issues, for example against another system or against another item, or it's spreading things out on the page too much or anything else, then in the properties panel at the bottom down here, but only when you go to engrave mode, there's an option for some of these items. So these, you could move it somewhere else. But if you've got other system items that are causing you issues as well, there is an avoid collisions. So now this avoid collisions down here is exactly the same as the one we were looking at for all of the parts. But I want avoid collisions turned on for the score, but in occasional cases with some items, I want to toggle this so that it doesn't affect the spacing of other items. You see, this one's now moved. So let me just press undo for a second. So if this is in the default position, and I choose this item and I turn on avoid collisions, you see it now drops into that space. Now I might need to do a little manual change, but I don't need to do much of a change, and it regains the space. Dorico stops allocating the space in there, so it stops doing some of its automatic options. It's even more of an option, if you were in the middle, for example here, where things are a bit tight. And let's say you put some text in here. I don't know why, but if you put some staff text in here, then it's going to force these two staves apart. You see there was a little jump then. So if you want to get, that space back, then when you've chosen this item in engrave mode, then you can turn on this little toggle so that it's not doing the avoid collisions for that one item, and now you can manually position it so it fits, but it doesn't affect your staff spacing. If you haven't toggled this, then you can move this all you like, but it's not going to give you that bit of space back. You're not going to get the space back. And that's normally the more important thing for the overall spacing of the project. So again, as a last resort, at the end, when I'm looking at formatting some of these things, if I need to make a bit more space somewhere, I can manually move things. But actually, I don't normally drag staves at all, but I do choose these little items, and in engrave mode, use this little avoid collisions option so that it's not affecting my spacing somewhere else. And that can be, in some cases, staff attached text. You see down the bottom down here, it says staff attached text for this one, and this is system text, and they can both sometimes have those collision options. So that's a quick bit of, I'm sure Bark doesn't want these rehearsal numbers or text, but there you go. You might have them in your projects. You may also find it the same with lines. So these text items, also if you're using any of these line items, these can also affect spacing. So you might need to select the line and use the same option to avoid collisions if that was a useful option. No problem, Janet. No problem at all. Just reading the comments. So yes, if there are any, are there any questions about any of those things? So the other things you might want to do at the end, of course, you're going to want to print it. You've got options to export these things. You can export various things, but this includes saving a project template here. The save a project template means that everything you've got in here, apart from the music itself. So if you're writing for the same instrumentation again tomorrow, then maybe saving a project template is a good idea. If you want the page template things that you've set up, then in engrave mode, you've got these page template sets and the full score, and of course the parts, because they're different page templates. You can export one or both of these, and you can export them to use in other projects. And then when you open another project, you can import things into your new project, and you can choose to use those template sets. You can see up here it says the current set, so you can choose what the current set is that you want to use for any of your pages. So you can import and export your page templates. We also looked at various things to do with the paragraph styles to make things look consistent. And you can, when you're setting paragraph styles, click the little star, because then, what did I do? Small italics. I've clicked the little star so that all of these things then get imported automatically. Actually, what's also really useful is if you click the little star, it's then available to make a shortcut for that paragraph style. So instead of just using Shift X to make a text item and then changing the paragraph style, if you want it, you can go to Preferences and you can go to Key Commands, and when you then search for, mine was called Small Italics, and so here in Create Text, my Small Italics, I could give it a shortcut, or I could give it a shortcut for System Text. So then when I press that shortcut, it will jump me straight into the text item with that paragraph style to save me having to choose it. It's less clicks, it's less, less time is what we all need in the end when we're working on these things. So that's a really useful option. So you have to click the star for your paragraph style, but then it's available to make it into a shortcut if you need it. And then if you've got a project that you've already worked on and you want to change things, then you can go to the library manager and you can import those paragraph styles, you can import those lines, you can import whatever the other things are from another project. Drag the project over here, and then you can look at all of those options in that project and selectively choose differences, selectively import the options you want. A bit like house styles, but you don't have to do the whole thing. If you want the entire house style, just click this option up here and it will literally import all the options and all the collections and everything. If you really, really wanted to import everything, then you could. I'm not going to right now. Discard. So those are you kind of importing all of those options if you ever need them from another project. There's also a couple of neat tricks, by the way, with text that I just want to show you because I use these a lot this week. When you choose a staff text item and you right click on it, you can go to text and you can change the text to system text, which can be really neat sometimes, because sometimes you want them to be system text. So sometimes if you need to switch them over, you can. But also you can choose one or more text items and you can change the paragraph style. So let's say you'd added in a bunch of these for some reason, and you needed to change all of them at the same time. You can just choose them, filter them, select them, however you want to do it. And when you right click and go to text, you can change the paragraph style. So I could make them all my small italics size if I wanted to, all at the same time, because it's a neat option when you right click and change those. So, hang on a second. All right, here we go. Some comments. If I don't want rehearsal marks on just one part, like a vocal part, I need to print a single page SATB for church bulletins from these orchestrated hymns. I think your only option would be to kind of try and hide it if you don't want it on some of the parts, but you want it on others. Or you'd have to make something that looked like this and kind of add it in multiple places. It's a bit messy. Are you sure you don't want those? If you can send me an example, maybe email me an example where that would work, we could kind of maybe work out what the best option for those would be. But normally, if you're telling somebody there's a rehearsal mark, you want to tell everybody. But maybe, let me know on an email what the options are you need for that. I have a question about exporting all parts to one folder at once. I have to name each part individually. Well, the parts are all named by these sections here. If you're exporting these as PDFs, for example, then on the right-hand side over here, when you go to PDF, there's a file name options here. So if you choose the file name options button, then this gives you that you can set a recipe for what you want this to be. So my full score is going to say Preview 01 Full Score Brandenburg. And you can choose all the various options, including layout name, which would be the instrument name. And you see it says layout name is $L, which is why it's putting the layout name in there for the full score. So this one would say flute if it was the flute part. So make sure layout name is included in your recipe, and you can reset this to default. You can add in extra items into here, and it will then show you a preview of what that would look like when you export them. So maybe that's what you meant with those if you were exporting PDFs. But yes, let me know otherwise if that didn't answer your question. You've emailed me, great. So on the contemporary music. So yeah, if you want to send me an email about that one as well, if it didn't answer your question, let me know. Are there limits to the number of custom token names or templates you can create? I don't know. So tokens themselves, you can't make custom tokens. So the tokens are the ones that are available in here. These are your project tokens, and you've also, of course, got your flow tokens. So you can't make new tokens, but you can make lots of templates using those. And just because it says copyist doesn't mean it has to be the copyist. I know, some people have reused work number or composition year or something else if they needed to another field that wasn't there. But I don't think there's a limit to the number of templates. So, but I don't know. Maybe you're going to let me know at some point if you reach a limit. But no, I don't think there's a limit. So, I don't think there's any other questions at the moment. We've reached the top of another hour. So hopefully that's answered lots of your questions. My email's just there in the chat, so discoverdorico@steinberg.de. If you have any questions after this and you think, oh, I meant to ask this question about something, then let me know. If you'd signed up for this as part of the Eventbrite, I also sent you an email anyway, so you've got my email address with the details for this session. The next session, which will be on music XML importing and then playback, there will be one this Saturday, but if you're following all the Wednesday sessions and these, then it will be the same time next week on Wednesday for that one. Oh, there's another quick question. Why is printing a part looking different from what's on the part screen? If you're looking at a part here, and here's the flute part, then this will look exactly the same as when you go to print mode and you click on the flute part. So have you selected the same layout here that you were looking at when you were in write mode up here? So if you're only making, if you've only got one instrument, maybe you're looking at the score containing one instrument and not the part, or vice versa. And when you go to print mode, make sure you're looking at the same layout over here. Is it the score or the parts? Because if there's only one instrument, they'll look very similar, but the parts will always have the part name in the top left corner and the score won't. But if there's only one instrument, they will potentially look very similar, but they won't be the same because they are actually different layouts. Hopefully that's a useful option. Can you remind us how to sign up for a session? Of course, no problem. If you go to, here's the page. Here is the full Dorico page. And if you have signed up, then there is one more of these. So if you're following the Wednesday sessions, then the next one will be on the 15th at the same time as it was today. And you can sign up there, and then you'll get the details. If you don't want to do that bit, you can also, when you go to the Wednesday sessions playlist here on YouTube, then the session is already listed here as part of the playlist. So if you want to, you can also click on this option here. You can click on the little bell icon or the subscribe button here and subscribe to that one, and you'll already get the link. See, this one's live, but yes, you'll get the link anyway. YouTube will notify you at that point as well. So depending on how you prefer, you can do it that way. But yes, the Eventbrite one, I've just put the link in the chat there as well, if you want to use that. We've got a couple of other questions. Oh, yes, sorry. Shelby, you're going to email me. Fantastic. Yes. And then let me know. And yes, you're right, Anu. Practicing and learning. Yes, hopefully, you're now kind of starting some of your own projects in Dorico. We have, of course, if you want to do some of the other lessons and things we've got, there is this getting started page with a first steps guide. I really recommend this, written by my colleague Lily, who's done all our documentation as well. And you can follow, I've just put that in the chat, the getting started guide. Download the PDF, or you can use the online version. There's a video follow along that I've done as well. Teaches you initially how to do a piano piece and all sorts of details about how to enter a piano piece. All the shortcuts and instructions are all part of that. And then you'll also do an extract of a blues song as well, so you'll get a slightly different style. But those kind of guided lessons, if you've not done one before, are a really good way to start learning how to use Dorico. And then what we'll then do next week, presuming that hopefully you've done also, the session one and some of the note input things, and you found your favourite note input options, or I have a few of my favourites, but whichever ones you prefer. You've then maybe done the arrangement options that we did here, where we did some there's finale-like options and pop arrangements of things that we did to make some arrangements. We've done some of the layout things from today's session, and the next one after that will be, I've got some projects, let's say in Finale, and I want to import those into Dorico. How do I make these look the best I can, even though I'd maybe worked on them, in Finale, in Sibelius or anything else? What are the options to make them look as good as possible in Dorico? And also, in a couple of cases, what are the things that Dorico's doing that I might want to reset, change, or otherwise to make sure I get everything exactly as I want it from my earlier project? So Music XML is going to be the session we'll do next time, and we'll also then look a little bit also at, once you've imported it, how would you get the playback to change? So if you wanted to use our default sounds or switch to Note Performer or something else, maybe use the Garitan sounds, how would you do that? So we'll have a brief look at playback templates as well in the session next week, so hopefully you can join me for that one. I don't think there's any other questions. It's all recorded live, so you can now go back and watch these 2 hours again, but I recommend maybe getting a cup of tea first and do that. There is a quick question. Is there a way to hide a note in a chord without deleting part of the staff line? I'm not sure what you mean, Mikhail. Can you email me? Email me a quick example or a graphic, and then we'll do it that way. So thank you very much for joining today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Join us at the same time next week, and we'll look at Music XML import. And let me know if you've got any other questions in the meantime. Thank you. Bye.